Alright, hello everybody. Friendly Red here, ready to reminisce about my favorite games of 2025. Another year has come and gone. This halfway mark of the 2020s brought with it some pretty spectacular new game releases. So, like I did last year, I figured it would be fun to look back on this year in gaming, and pick up my absolute favorite games I played, and give them the spotlight they deserve. Unlike last year's Best of Video though, the structure of this one will be slightly different, more of a segments or chapters kind of organization to it all. I'll put the timestamps for each section down in the description in case you want to jump around to specific spots in the video, or just want to hear about certain games or groupings, so feel free to look there for your viewing pleasure and or convenience. There's a lot of talking about video games to get through though, so I suppose it's best we get into the discussion proper. Here are my favorite games of 2025. For our first segment of the Best of 2025, we'll start with a game that's only been briefly featured on the channel this year, but never got its own dedicated video, that being Pokemon Legends ZA. The second Pokemon Legends game, following 2022's Legends Arceus, Legends ZA was a game I was very excited for, with it bringing us back to the Kalos region from Pokemon X and Y, or, one city from the Kalos region, and reintroducing a much beloved mechanic that debuted in those titles, that being Mega Evolution, which allows for certain Pokemon to power up even further beyond their final evolutionary stages, while giving them some sweet new designs as well. On top of all that, Legends ZA brought with it a pretty radical shakeup to the traditional turn-based battles you'd find in Pokemon games up to this point, as battles in ZA occur in real time, allowing the player to move around freely and issue commands to their Pokemon in much more fast-paced battles, almost like what we've seen battles be like in the various animated Pokemon shows and movies. I've always wanted a Pokemon game that played more like what we see in those aforementioned shows and movies, so with the new battle system of ZA seemingly offering exactly that, in addition to the return of Mega Evolutions, ZA was shaping up to be a really exciting new Pokemon game, and one that could potentially dethrone Legends Arceus as my current favorite game in the series. And I gotta say, after playing it, it's come very, very close to doing so. I've absolutely adored my time with ZA, and even after clearing the main game, I still am really enjoying it. The new real-time battle system does indeed deliver on encounters similar to what's in the shows and movies, and while it isn't perfect, I think it's a great first showing for this type of gameplay. I certainly hope Game Freak continues to iterate upon it, either in future mainline Pokemon games, or at the very least in future Pokemon Legends titles. Unlike in the mainline games, Pokemon don't have any of their passive abilities in ZA, which does strip away quite a bit of depth to builds and battling. So if they can incorporate those into the system in a future game, alongside giving us some better control or command over where our current active Pokemon moves or its position on the battlefield, it would be even better. Going around and catching Pokemon is as enjoyable as it's always been, especially due to ZA using the same capturing mechanics that were in Legends Arceus, allowing you to sneak around and throw Pokeballs to try and capture a Pokemon without having to necessarily engage in a battle and weaken it before attempting a capture. Like with the new battling system, it just makes for a much faster experience. And it can be pretty satisfying to get a successful sneak capture on a Pokemon you want, or just run around a wild zone and capture multiple Pokemon in quick succession. So on the gameplay front, Legends ZA does a lot right, and that's why I'll even mentioning stuff like the new Mega Evolutions, rogue Mega Evolved boss battles, or how surprisingly enjoyable it is to traverse the city, with light little parkour challenges set up around the map that you can tackle, and good amounts of on-the-ground and vertical exploration on offer. It's just a shame it's as limited as it is really. I alluded to it earlier, but Legends ZA only partially lives up to the idea of returning us to the Kalos region from X and Y, as the entire game of ZA takes place within just one singular city from those games, that being Lumiose City. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I actually don't hate the idea of the game only taking place in Lumiose, as the idea of exploring a vast, urban metropolis with towering skyscrapers, winding alleyways, and plenty of different locales and shops to take in, it sounds pretty awesome for a Pokemon game. And make no mistake, Lumiose City is certainly expanded upon from its original iteration in X and Y, but unfortunately, I feel it doesn't even come close to reaching its full potential. The map just feels too small and enclosed for what is essentially supposed to be the Pokemon equivalent of Paris, and it doesn't help that what is here to explore and see is laughably bland and simplistic, with flat, repeated textures adorning most of the buildings in the game, almost appearing as if all the surfaces in the game were just painted on, with little to no 3D detail or depth to any of it. It certainly doesn't match what you'd want or expect from Pokemon, the highest grossing multimedia franchise on the planet, but I suppose this isn't all too surprising, as the Switch-era Pokemon games have had similar problems since, I'd say, the release of Sword and Shield. And now, personally, I don't really mind if a game has bad or underwhelming visuals, and at least on Switch 2, the performance of the game matches what I would expect a game that looks like this to be, but it's just kinda frustrating and deflating to see the Pokemon games continue to miss the mark in one or two big ways when the gameplay itself is as fun as it is. Like, when I look at how Lumiose is depicted in other Pokemon media, and then I compare it to what we got in ZA, it just kinda makes me think, if only. We've still got a lot to get through, and I feel like I've already gone on long enough about ZA, so I suppose I'll end this one with a brief summary. The core gameplay of Legends ZA is insanely fun, and having Mega Evolutions back in tandem with the new real-time battling is a big part of that. The soundtrack is full of excellent tunes, though I do think it would have been nice to have more tracks for overworld exploration, as while what's there is good, it can get pretty repetitive after a while. Exploration is enjoyable, as is going around and catching Pokemon out in the city in the various wild zones, but feels like it only meets a fraction of its full potential, with the city of Lumiose here being too small and simplistic looking for what it's supposed to be and represent in the world of Pokemon. I also still feel pretty iffy about how they handled the DLC for ZA, but at the end of the day, it is optional content, and I probably shouldn't let it influence how I feel or talk about the base game. So while Legends ZA certainly has some downsides and drawbacks, I still found it to be an immensely enjoyable new Pokemon game, and it's no doubt one of the most fun games I've played this year. If you can look past the underwhelming visuals, you'll find one of the freshest takes on the Pokemon formula since Legends Arceus, and despite my issues I have with it, it's a game that I see myself continuing to enjoy for quite some time yet. From one monster-centric franchise to another, next up to discuss is Capcom's Monster Hunter Wilds. This, and the next talking point of this segment, are games I've already given my initial impressions on earlier this year, so how do I feel about them here now at the end of 2025? Truthfully, I haven't really been playing too much Wilds recently, as the last time I was really active in it was back when Title Update 2 dropped. My absence from the game isn't due to a growing disinterest or anything like that. I think it's just that I got caught up playing other releases, and haven't really gone back to Wilds yet due to being busy with other games. I'm certainly interested in playing some more, as I really do want to try out the Final Fantasy XIV collaboration quest they added with Omega, and the upcoming Title Update 4 looks pretty promising too, so perhaps I'll get back to the hunting of monsters sooner rather than later. Anyways, despite my time away from the game in this latter half of the year, Wilds still remains one of my most played 2025 releases, which should say it all right there. My thoughts haven't really changed since my initial impressions video I did back in March. It remains as a sublime action game, alone or with friends, and the only real issues I personally still have with this game are in its technical performance and makeup, which, make no mistake, are still present and understandably why many others dislike this game. I don't want to sound like I'm downplaying these issues or anything, they're very serious, and obviously take away from many's enjoyment of the game. I'm just not very well versed or knowledgeable about the topic, which is why I can't really offer any more than just highlighting it as a problem with the game. Title Update 4 is set to bring with it the first of 3 phases of optimization changes, in addition to the new game content being added, so hopefully this will be the first step in getting the game into a much better technical state than it is currently in. Obviously, it's still no excuse to why the game launched the way it did, and remains in a pretty messy state, but at least Capcom actually listened to the constant feedback and negativity online regarding the game's performance, and is actually looking to make the game better and how it should have been in the first place. I truly hope that this game's technical profile will improve with these changes, because underneath all that mess is a spectacular Monster Hunter game, and just a damn fine action game, plain and simple. The monsters, both old and new, are so well designed and are incredibly fun to fight against, and there's so much you can work towards and change up with your weapons and builds that it makes for a ridiculously replayable and addictive gameplay loop. I've talked in the past about how Capcom has been absolutely cooking with their output of games over the last console generation or so, and while Wilds has somewhat muddied their reputation a bit, it doesn't ruin the overall streak. And I'll stand by my opinion that Monster Hunter Wilds is an absolute masterclass action game. It deserves to be played by old and new fans of Monster Hunter alike, so please Capcom, please ensure that these changes and optimization fixes will allow for that. Let this game get the continued attention and recognition it deserves, as one of the finest action games of 2025, and as quite possibly one of the best Monster Hunter games ever made.
Good work. You're performing in top form today.
Our last talking point of this opening segment is none other than Ender Magnolia, Bloom in the Mist, sequel to 2021's Ender Lilies, Quietus of the Nights. This was one of the earliest heavy hitters of the year for me, releasing back at the end of January, and I can confidently say that even now at the end of the year, with so many more great games I've played and experienced, Ender Magnolia remains as one of my favorite games of 2025, and is an absolute must-play for anyone who enjoys a good Metroidvania. This game really doesn't falter in any ways I can think of, unlike our previous two talking points. There's no underwhelming graphics or visuals, and no bothersome or frustrating technical issues. Ender Magnolia is a smooth, gorgeous 2D action game slash Metroidvania, with a vast, haunting, steampunk-inspired world to explore and get lost in. It delivers the same strengths that its predecessor did. Beautiful 2D artwork making up the world and its characters, with equally beautiful music, once again spearheaded by Mealy, while also serving as a great sequel to Ender Lilies, with numerous improvements and additions that make Ender Magnolia a much more enjoyable experience than Ender Lilies was. Now, don't be mistaken, Ender Lilies is for sure a great game, but there were certainly some aspects of it that could have been done better, and thankfully, the developers at AdGlobe and Livewire did meaningfully enhance those aspects for the sequel here. As I had pointed out in my initial impressions video on the game earlier this year, the map system in Ender Magnolia is much more detailed than it was in Lilies, making it much easier to get around the world and explore each and every nook and cranny for secrets and collectibles. Additionally, you have access to more of the core movement abilities much earlier in Magnolia compared to Lilies, which makes the exploration and traversal of the world much more enjoyable, and doesn't lock you out of exploring more of the world early on compared to in the first game. Combat also sees improvements in Magnolia, with it feeling a bit faster and snappier, and generally flowing much better in both overworld encounters and boss fights. The pick your playstyle approach that Ender Lilies offered up remains here as well, with the player being able to equip and perform different attacks and techniques by summoning different homunculi, which you find more of and recruit to your cause over the course of the adventure, and I personally preferred them to the spirits that you had in Ender Lilies. While there aren't as many homunculi in the game as there were spirits in Ender Lilies, they felt much more like proper characters, probably on account of the fact that you directly interact with them quite often in the game, and even help them out with some of their own stories and struggles over the course of the adventure. Plus, each one of them has multiple different abilities you can unlock and choose to use instead of their starting one, which just adds to their depth and offers even more choice for the player. Taken as a whole then, with everything new that Ender Magnolia brings to the table, combined with all the aspects it took and improved upon from Ender Lilies, it shines brightly as a successful sequel. It's a fun, satisfying, and gorgeous game to both control and hear, and is easily one of the finest Metroidvanias of the year, which, as I'm sure you may be aware, is a pretty impressive accomplishment to achieve in a year that has two of the most anticipated Metroidvania sequels of all time, but more on those later. I'll end this segment by echoing what I said about the game at the start of this year. Ender Magnolia, Bloom in the Mist is a stunning work of art, and a confident and masterfully made Metroidvania, one that deserves to be played by anyone who enjoys the genre. I've mentioned it here and there in the past, but I don't exactly play a lot of modern-day multiplayer titles. That's not to say I don't play or enjoy any multiplayer games, but for me, too many titles these days have lots of aspects or focus on elements of multiplayer gaming I'm just not that into. So most of my time is spent in single-player titles, or in multiplayer games that focus on things like PvE encounters or co-op play. However, there were 3 multiplayer games this year that I actually ended up really getting into, and thus, I felt they were worth highlighting in their own segment. Now, technically speaking, only 2 of these 3 games are true multiplayer-focused titles, as one of them is a game that can simply be played in a cooperative multiplayer environment if you so choose. That being said, playing in a multiplayer environment is how I, and I'm sure a vast amount of the player base, experienced it, hence why I'm including it here in the multiplayer segment. Anyways, with that prelude out of the way, let's get into my favorite multiplayer games of 2025. Since it's somewhat of the odd one out of the bunch, I suppose we'll start this segment proper by talking about Abiotic Factor. One of the most inventive and fresh releases in its genre, Abiotic Factor is an open-world survival craft game that does so much, so right. While so many of its contemporaries throw you out into some kind of procedurally generated wilderness, Abiotic Factor has you exploring, scavenging, and surviving in a vast, handcrafted underground research facility, akin to Black Mesa or an SCP research facility. Not only is this change in scenery refreshing, but the sheer quality of every single different wing of the Gate Cascade research facility you find yourself in is astounding, as there's so much to explore and discover, and without saying or showing too much, it goes far, far beyond just what you'll see in the facility. The resource management and crafting that comes with the genre are handled quite well here, with simple but fun systems in place for uncovering new recipes, and it's also just funny to see some of the different gear and equipment you can come up with using the different scraps and materials that are available around the facility. I can't think of too many other games where you're able to weaponize pencils, paper clips, and other general office supplies, alongside laser katanas, jet boots, and lightning spears, but Abiotic Factor allows for that and so much more. It's got a great style to it all as well, pulling heavy visual inspiration from mid to late 90s 3D titles, most notably the original Half-Life, of course. It's not just in the visuals either, as later encounters certainly reminded me of my adventures through Black Mesa, but it's never overbearing. And while the game does certainly pull inspiration from other sources, like SCP games and entries, Silent Hill, and much more, it makes it all fit within the world and story it's telling. And I say it does so to great effect. I really never thought I would enjoy a game in this genre again, as much as I did with Abiotic Factor, but, well, here we are. If you're looking for a great multiplayer experience with friends, or even just a slow burn adventure to tackle alone, I'd absolutely recommend you check out Abiotic Factor. It's unfortunate that this one kinda got buried amongst all the other fantastic releases that occurred this year, but hopefully more people will be made aware of it as time goes on. And even though this year marked the game's full 1.0 launch out of early access, the developers plan to continue to add to the game, so it's not like it'll just fade away now that the game is fully out. So, who knows? Perhaps with future updates, it may be able to pick up some more steam, and get the wider recognition I think it truly deserves. Abiotic Factor is an expansive, sometimes silly, always fun, and lovingly made experience, and it is absolutely worth your time.
You're in the business of keeping gatekeepers moving, and that means doing it safely. Whether you're shifting a supercomputer or helping deliver critical hypertension upgrades, you must don't worry. They know what you're doing and how to do it.
Moving right along to the true multiplayer-focused games as part of this segment, Battlefield 6 is next up to discuss. Serving as a bit of a return to form, Battlefield 6 saw the series return to a modern-day combat focus, while also bringing back the traditional class-based identities that were absent from the prior series entry, Battlefield 2042, at launch. Even after changes and updates to address player feedback were implemented into 2042 regarding the classes, it still never quite felt the same as a proper Battlefield game should. But thankfully, Battlefield 6 has corrected many of those issues from 2042 and has delivered a pretty stellar first-person shooter. Admittedly, prior to 6 launching, I'd been away from the Battlefield series for quite some time, and I've always been a pretty casual player of the series, so I can't really speak in depth about every single problem 2042 had, or the issues and problems with 6. Going off what I've played though, Battlefield 6 delivers pretty much exactly what I'd want from a new, modern-day Battlefield game, with tight and satisfying gunplay, proper class identity with unique roles to perform, and an almost constant onslaught of hectic and explosive moments and actions that have always been a staple of the series. It doesn't hurt that the game just looks great, while also running like a dream across a breadth of different hardware, which realistically shouldn't be something that has to be pointed out separately, but unfortunately that's kind of where we're at right now with lots of modern day big releases exhibiting technical and performance issues. It seems like the biggest concern, or perhaps smallest, I've seen discussed constantly about the game is the maps, as many find most of them to be perhaps too congested, leading to not a lot of downtime or breathing room between encounters. And I mean, I guess I can understand that to a degree, but whenever I've been playing the game, I don't think I've ever had any deeper thoughts or similar feelings cross my mind. Sure, there are some maps I definitely prefer over others, but I don't know. I can't say I've ever felt too strongly or disappointed with any of the maps while playing. Again, that could just boil down to me being a casual player of the game, and not really being as into or informed about the series and prior Battlefield games as others are, and I'm certainly not dismissing their concerns or issues. For me personally though, I haven't really had too many complaints or problems with the game, and have greatly enjoyed what I've played up until now, and will most likely continue to do so for some time yet. Actually, I will dock the game in one regard that stuck out to me, and that's in its menus, as they really aren't too intuitive, can be rather sluggish and unresponsive at times, and feel a bit too free-to-play / mobile gamey with their overall presentation, layout, and abundance of ads and information, which is not a great thing to be like when, you know, you aren't a free-to-play game and cost $70 instead. I guess I could also comment on the Battle Royale, Battle Pass, and large amounts of paid cosmetic jargon that's flooded into the game with its Season 1 update, but I don't really know if I have anything meaningful to add to that conversation. I don't really like or care for any of it, but I'm just going to continue to ignore it all and just play the core Battlefield multiplayer that I paid for, which I feel is what most players are doing anyways. So while it has some modern day multiplayer gaming ick starting to show up in it, I'd say Battlefield 6 largely delivers on what it set out to do. It successfully brings the series back to the modern day combat encounters and environments fans have adored and wanted back since Battlefield 4, with great gunplay, bombastic destruction, traditional class-based roles to fulfill, and some excellent audio throughout too, all wrapped up in a game that looks great and runs even better. Closing out our multiplayer-centric discussions, we have Arc Raiders, the much-anticipated sci-fi extraction shooter from Embark, who are also responsible for the finals. I mentioned it back when highlighting the game before it released, but I wasn't really following this one too closely prior to its launch. I knew it had a lot of positive buzz and hype around it, but given that it's an extraction shooter, a genre that's known for being quite hardcore and punishing, combined with my general disinterest in most multiplayer games, I figured it just wasn't really going to be my thing. Then comes launch day though. And after seeing countless positive reviews and gameplay on the game, I decided to buy into the hype. And nearly 40 hours later, I can say that Arc Raiders is indeed a great multiplayer title, and perhaps even more surprising, a very accessible and fun extraction shooter. I say that's surprising because when I really think about it, extraction shooters don't sound like the most immediately appealing kind of game out there. Like, you're just supposed to wander around and look for random trinkets, materials, and equipment, all while trying to avoid other players who are doing the very same thing, while also being at risk of losing anything you brought with you, or found along the way if you die? It doesn't exactly sound very fun or inviting, right? Despite those thoughts, Arc Raiders has proven that these kinds of games can actually be quite enjoyable, and I think a big reason for that is due to how refined and polished of an experience Arc Raiders delivers with its extraction shooter gameplay, while also doing an excellent job of onboarding new players to the genre, and getting them used to the way everything works and all the different systems and mechanics you'll interact with, both in and outside of the raids. Like Battlefield 6, Arc Raiders is quite the handsome-looking game, while delivering smooth, consistent performance across a wide range of hardware. Though this aspect is actually even more notable than with Battlefield 6, as Arc Raiders is running on Unreal Engine 5, which is the engine we constantly see performance issues and problems with across a wide range of games releasing. Similarly, the actual gameplay in Arc Raiders just feels good. It's not anywhere close to as fast and hectic as something like Battlefield 6, but the slower, more methodical movement and gunplay fit the game well. And it's all backed up by some very well-crafted animation and sound work, in addition to the highly detailed environments and art direction. It's also just, like, weirdly satisfying to loot things in this game. It's hard to pinpoint exactly why, but exploring all the different maps in the game and taking in the sights can be quite nice and almost serene at times, and gathering up different materials and equipment can feel pretty rewarding too, especially if you're in a high-value loot area and are able to successfully get away with lots of goodies. I also love the clashing of scrappy, retro, futuristic gear and equipment the humans have in the game against the cleaner, higher tech look and weaponry that the Ark employ. Speaking of the Ark, they're another highlight of the experience. Extraction shooters typically contain both PvP and PvE encounters. Taking on the Ark that wander around and patrol the different maps in the game are how you'll get your PvE fix. Unlike in a lot of other PvE games, the Ark are actually quite threatening, regardless of how big or small they may be, and rushing towards them guns a-blazing isn't really the optimal way to deal with them a lot of the time. They force you to think and approach them differently than other computer-controlled enemies in other games you've played in the past, and I appreciate the depth and genuine level of danger that they bring to the game. Embark could have very easily had the arc be cannon fodder for players, and left the real threat and challenge to PvP encounters. But I'm glad they didn't do that here, and instead made the arc quite formidable and consistently interesting to engage with, by not making them super weak or dumb, but with regards to their behaviors in patrolling the map and identifying players. Overall, I'm very pleased with Arc Raiders, and have been surprised with just how much I enjoy it. The only times I've ever felt iffy on the game have been in some of the player encounters I've had, but that's not really a fault of the game, but rather falls to individuals who act or play in certain ways that generally aren't very fun to deal with. I've run across my fair share of extraction point campers, backstabbers, and groups of players that seemingly don't even want to try to talk things out, and go straight into starting fights. I'm not gonna lie and say I enjoy PvP, but I also wouldn't want it to be taken out of the game, as I do think the different kinds of interactions and the general uncertainty that encounters with other players bring about is a big part of the game's appeal, and any extraction shooter for that matter, as without those unscripted, sometimes funny, sometimes frustrating moments, this genre wouldn't really be the same. It's just one of those things that comes with the territory, I suppose. And truthfully, I've had more positive and chill encounters than I've had bad ones, at least when I was playing solo. I haven't actually played solo in a bit, so I'm not sure if the environment has changed too much there, but in squads recently, it's usually just shoot on sight, with little to no talking occurring. That is until people start going down, but even then, the kind of talking that occurs at that point usually isn't exactly pleasant. To conclude then, Arc Raiders is a great looking, great running new extraction shooter, and quite possibly the best one you can play today. It does an excellent job getting players into this notoriously hardcore and oftentimes unforgiving genre, and while those aspects are still present here, I still find Arc Raiders to be consistently engaging and fun, even when you had a bad raid or lose it all to some unsavory players. It feels great to play, offers up some impressive sights to behold and locales to explore, and can keep you on edge even when not dealing with the unpredictability of other players, thanks to the arc in the game posing a real, genuine threat to even the most kitted out, battle-hardened raiders out there, with plenty of their own tricks and challenges you'll have to learn to deal with over time. So, I'd say Embark is now 2 for 2 with the success of Arc Raiders, and I'll be curious to see how the game grows and evolves over time. If you've been interested in checking out extraction shooters, I can't think of a better recommendation right now than Arc Raiders, that wholly delivers in pretty much every aspect and way I can think of. And, looking past all the specifics, it's just a really fun game to play.
Get out of here.
Hey, I mean,
Yes! You can't top this.
For this next segment, I wanted to take a bit of time to talk about some games that I've certainly enjoyed greatly, but for one reason or another, haven't gotten around to finishing them fully yet. Despite this, I felt it was worth giving them some time here, as they are all just as fun and high quality as any of the other games discussed so far, and some of them probably would have found their way into the other segments of this list, had I ended finishing them up before year's end. As for the games in question, they are none other than Split Fiction, The Elder Scrolls IV, Oblivion Remastered, Pipistrello and the Cursed Yo-Yo, and Unbeatable. Split Fiction is the latest release from Hazelight, the modern-day co-op gaming masterminds who are also responsible for A Way Out and It Takes Two, which you may recall won Game of the Year back in 2021. Both of those previous games were fantastic co-op adventures, filled to the brim with inventive and engaging puzzles, platforming, and so many other varied and imaginative scenarios to play through. And from what I played of Split Fiction back when it released in March, combined with the excellent reviews and reception the game received across the board, it's safe to say it was another slam dunk for Hazelight, and very likely could have been crowned Game of the Year, if it weren't for the steep competition that followed as this year went on. Regardless, Split Fiction is absolutely worth your time, and I'd still consider it to be one of my personal favorite releases of the year, and one of the best releases of 2025 overall, even having not finished the game fully. It really is that good, and I seriously need to make some time to finally see it through to the end. On the Elder Scrolls IV, Oblivion Remastered side of things, Todd Howard, you've done it again. This may be a remaster of a game from 2006, but for me personally, it might as well have been a brand new entry in the series, because I've never played Oblivion until this remaster released. And I gotta say, after having played Skyrim numerous times over the years, before eventually having my fill and moving on from it, it was really nice to step back into the world of the Elder Scrolls with Oblivion Remastered. Like with Skyrim, Oblivion offers up a vast, dense fantasy landscape to explore, with plenty of story quests, side quests, villages, dungeons, guilds, and so much more to keep yourself occupied with. And it's precisely because of all the stuff there is to see and do in the game that I've still yet to finish it. What can I say? I get distracted easily. And I mean, let's be honest here, even when you've finished an Elder Scrolls game, you can still continue to play it and find new and interesting things to do. So even if I do somehow manage to finally stop getting sidetracked and continue on with the main quest, I know there will always be more waiting for me, even after it's all said and done. I've loved exploring Cyrodiil, getting into scuffles with all manner of men and monsters, finding cool new weapons, armor, and other trinkets, making my own spells, taking on the forces of Oblivion itself, and all the other crazy, strange, and fantastical scenarios I found myself in. Even unfinished, Oblivion Remastered is another personal favorite of mine this year, and is a no-brainer for any RPG fans out there. As for Pipistrello and Unbeatable, these are two that I've sadly had even less time than with Split Fiction and Oblivion Remastered, especially so for Unbeatable, as I've not really had a lot of time to spend on the game due to work on this video. Even so, they make it here into this segment due to their sheer quality and craftsmanship on display, as even though I haven't spent as much time with them as some of the other games on this list, they still left quite an impact on me. Pipistrello oozes charm and a love for the Game Boy Advance era of 2D gaming, and is a great time based on the few hours I've spent with the game. The music and pixel art is all top-notch, rivaling the best of the best you'd see on the aforementioned GBA, and I find it to be a very unique take on the Metroidvania genre, with it being played from a top-down perspective, unlike the usual 2D side-scrolling you get out of similar games. I also really dig the character designs and world, as they remind me of something like an early/mid-2000s Cartoon Network show. I don't know why, but I think it just fits the gameplay, music, and art really well, and I suppose it also helps further cement it into that GBA-like era of gaming, since the kinds of shows Pipistrello reminds me of would have also been out during the reign of the Game Boy Advance. Much like with Split Fiction, I desperately need to get back to this one, as I really did love what I've played so far, and I have no doubts I'll continue to love the rest of what this game has in store for me. Finally, we have Unbeatable. As I mentioned, due to its very recent release lining up with my work on this video, I've yet to really sink a considerable amount of time into it, but based on what I've played of the demo and the full game, I'm confident in calling this one of 2025's best, and I'm pretty sure it would have made it into the main segment from earlier, if not even my top 3. It's hard to fully articulate how much I love how this game looks. There's plenty of other anime-inspired looking games on the market, and I've played my fair share of them over the years, but there's just something about the specific style and animation work in Unbeatable that really, dare I say, strikes a chord with me. It's not all just pretty visuals that are carrying this game though, as the game is full of truly excellent music, both in and outside the main rhythm game action sequences, which, when combined with the visuals, make Unbeatable the absolutely lovely feast for the eyes and ears that it is. It's not without its flaws, of course, but Unbeatable does so much, so right. Not just as a fun, fast, and enjoyable rhythm game, but as a beautiful, head-banging and feet-tapping work of art. Before we get into the top 3 discussion, I figured I would talk about the games I played this year that were nominees for Game of the Year at the Game Awards. We can go ahead and push Death Stranding 2, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and Hades 2 to the wayside, as I haven't gotten to any of those yet. I'm fairly positive Hades 2 would probably be in my top 3, based on what I played during Early Access, but alas, I've sadly yet to get to the full game, so we'll have to leave that discussion for another time. With those titles out of the way, that leaves us with the nominees I did play and complete, those being Funny Monkey Game, Funny Bug Game, and French Paper Mario. Though, of these 3, we'll only be talking about Funny Monkey and the number 33 for now, but fret not, we'll get to talking about the Funny Bug Game here real soon. Donkey Kong Bonanza was another wonderfully fun 3D platformer from Nintendo, more specifically, the same internal development team that brought us Super Mario Odyssey back in 2017, and it's pretty apparent once you get into it. Just like in Odyssey, the stages are vast and ripe for exploration, with plenty of different collectibles and secrets to find. But of course, being a Donkey Kong game, there's quite a bit different to this one as well. Right from the get-go, you get pretty familiar with Donkey Kong's increased strength over Mario, as he's able to climb up and around most of the level terrain, in addition to being able to smash and break through a good amount of it too. And as the game progresses, DK's traveling partner Pauline is able to help him transform into different Bonanza forms, which grant him access to all kinds of different new abilities, and when you combine those transformations, With the core movement and techniques, all of which can be upgraded and expanded as you progress through the game, it makes for quite the varied set of tools available to the player, and opens up so many different ways to tackle each stage. Speaking of those stages, I've got to give props to the devs here, as it was undoubtedly a tricky balancing act making them all. They had to deliver a satisfying play area to explore that still feels like a properly handcrafted stage, with clear main objectives, while also not restricting it too much so that the player can still utilize DK's destructive capabilities and powers to great effect, and I'd say they did a fantastic job in doing so. Each and every level is lovingly made, and can be just as easily unmade however you may see fit by using all the different powers DK has. And it was never not satisfying to explore them all, plowing my way through terrain, enemies, and whatever else stood between me and those sweet, sweet Banandium gems. The game didn't necessarily blow my mind or offer me a world-changing experience or anything, but similar to last year's Astrobot, it delivered hours of inventive, joyful, heartfelt fun, and it was a definite highlight of the Switch 2's launch window period, and of 2025 as a whole. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Donkey Kong Bonanza is yet another smash hit 3D platforming success from Nintendo, and absolutely deserves to be played by anyone who has a Switch 2, both now and in the future. Oh, and this game has some pretty banging music too. And now, Player Obscure, Expedition 33. I'm gonna be honest here, I don't know if I have a ton to add to the conversation for this one. I did quite enjoy my time with the game, and love just as many of the aspects of it as everyone else does. The world is so mystique and different from anything else we've ever seen, largely in part due to its mixing of inspirations from fantasy worlds, Belle Epoque France, and perhaps a dash of steampunk here and there as well. The story pulls you in right away, and continues to impress and keep you playing more to find out how everything will play out. Without spoiling anything, by the time it was said and done, I was left with so many more questions and thoughts swirling around in my head about it all, and the narrative and world of Expedition 33 is no doubt my favorite aspect of the game, and is easily the best story I've experienced this year in gaming. The music fits the game perfectly, with a great blend of haunting, somber melodies, and triumphant orchestral swells. The main cast of characters is full of great personalities that play so well off of one another, all brought to life by outstanding performances by some absolute juggernauts in the acting space, and there's so much more that I could mention in praise here, but it's surely nothing you haven't already heard or seen countless times over at this point. Player Obscure, Expedition 33 ended up winning 2025 Game of the Year, alongside winning in 8 other categories it was nominated for, and I have no issues whatsoever with it winning everything it did. Personally though, as much as I did enjoy Player Obscure, its gameplay didn't quite hit in the same way that all the other aspects of the game did for me, and I for sure had more fun with some other games this year than I did playing Expedition 33. Now, please do not misunderstand. I'm not saying the gameplay isn't fun or enjoyable. Not at all. The old school JRPG overworld exploration that leads into larger zones to freely roam around in and look for secrets and side missions works well, and the turn-based combat, with real-time elements mixed in, is supremely satisfying, and allows for so much skill expression and build crafting with all the different upgrades and weapons you can get for your party. Ultimately, I think my reason for not going with Player Obscure for my own personal Game of the Year comes down to a realization I've had over the course of this year in playing games. And it's that I sadly don't have as much time to dedicate to playing games as I did in the past. Because of this, I think I've really come to value playing games that are all about the gameplay first and foremost, with stuff like gripping narratives, lengthy cinematics, walls of text to click through, and similar aspects being a bit lower on the priority list. I certainly still enjoy a good narrative-driven game, for sure, but sometimes it's just nice to boot up a game and get right into actually playing it, especially after a long day where it may be harder for me to personally focus on or appreciate the more story-focused aspects of a game I'm playing. So with all that in mind, I hope I was able to articulate my reasoning for all that, and I really do want to reiterate that Player Obscure is as much of a masterpiece as you've surely been made aware of by now. I can't really think of any aspect it doesn't excel in, be it in gameplay, visuals, art direction, music, characters, performances, and of course, story. I'm incredibly fascinated in the world that the developers at Sandfall Interactive have created with Expedition 33, and I cannot wait to see where they might take us in the future. At last, we reach my top 3 games of the year, and starting off our discussion is Hollow Knight Silksong. I told you we'd get to the funny bug games soon enough, didn't I? Yep, Hollow Knight Silksong actually released this year if you can believe it, and you know what? After everything was said and done, I'd say it was definitely worth the wait. With a few caveats. Make no mistake, this is one of the most artistically sophisticated, amazing feeling to control, fast, flowing, and satisfying Metroidvanias you can play all year. Hell, leaving the genre and year aside, it's just one of the best games you can play in general. And the fact that you can get such a masterfully crafted experience like this for only $20, it's just incredible. I don't know what else to say. However, while I did enjoy so much of what Silksong delivered, there were a few things that didn't quite resonate with me. While they don't make me think of this game as anything less than the masterpiece it is, I'd be lying if I said that this game didn't sometimes frustrate me or leave me questioning what Team Cherry was thinking with some design and encounter decisions. I suppose what I'm about to discuss somewhat relates to the overall difficulty discussion surrounding Silksong, which, personally, I didn't have too many qualms with myself. Silksong is for sure a more difficult game than Hollow Knight, but I never found it to be impossible or unbearable, though there were certainly some encounters in the game that did start to lean more towards feeling like cheap or artificial difficulty, reminding me of some of the worst and infamous encounters or aspects of the Souls games. Additionally, while I found the vast majority of the map in Silksong fun to explore and uncover, there were a few areas that really started to test my patience, with frustrating and lengthy traversal required to get back to bosses, punishing environmental effects, and rather unpleasant theming and designs, even if the actual art and makeup of the areas was still beautiful to behold. The thing is though, I'm pretty sure this was all deliberate on Team Cherry's part. They really wanted to sell how hostile and unpredictable the foreign land of Farloom you explore is, so it makes sense to have some areas that truly test the player's patience and willpower, even if it may be to the detriment of the game's reputation to one or many of the individuals playing it. Though, as I said before, these areas or encounters don't make me think any less of the game personally. I'm not sure if I can put this into words properly, but I think if a game, or any piece or form of art for that matter, is able to make you feel in any sort of way, be it positively or negatively, I think that speaks to the quality and craftsmanship of said art. Sure, there were some times while playing Silksong where I felt perhaps more annoyed or frustrated with the game, but that just made my eventual triumph over those problematic encounters or areas that much more rewarding. And in the grand scheme of the game, they were really just a few droplets in the bucket. On the whole, Silksong delivers an epic, expansive adventure through a dangerous yet beautiful world, with some of the finest visuals, music, exploration, movement, and combat I've ever had the pleasure of experiencing in a 2D action game, Metroidvania, search action game, or whatever you want to call it. Despite whatever issues I or anyone else may have with this game, I think it's fair to say that Team Cherry delivered another masterpiece with Hollow Knight Silksong. It's unquestionably one of the best games of 2025, and I think it will very likely be looked back on in the future as one of the best games ever made, right alongside its predecessor. Moving along to my Game of the Year runner-up, we have Ghost of Yotei, sequel to the excellent 2020 open-world samurai epic, Ghost of Tsushima. I've made it pretty clear before how much I loved and still love Ghost of Tsushima, so you'd better believe I was eagerly awaiting Yotei's release ever since it was officially revealed back in September of 2024. It was a pretty long wait to endure, but I'm happy to say that it was well worth it, as Ghost of Yotei succeeds at being not only an amazing follow-up to one of my personal all-time favorite open-world games, but one of 2025's greatest releases. This game has it all. Stunning vistas and views in every single location you find yourself in, paired up with an excellent score, an impressive audio design / mixing in general, enjoyable exploration, and some of the most satisfying, visceral, and engaging third-person melee combat I've experienced in any action game. Every single encounter across my journey in Ezo felt immensely satisfying and rewarding, and I left every fight feeling like a badass and wanting more. It really is that good. This all isn't too surprising, I suppose, as Ghost of Tsushima had a lot of these points in its favor as well. Thinking about it here, similar to something like this year's Kirby Air Riders, Ghost of Yotei doesn't exactly reinvent the wheel, but rather takes what already works so well in the original and refines, expands, and polishes it further to near perfection. I'd say the developers at Sucker Punch absolutely succeeded in doing so with Yotei. If you played Tsushima and liked it, then you'll find a lot to continue to love here in Yotei, but that's not to discredit what Yotei does bring new to the table. The setting and time period in Yotei shake things up quite a bit, and I'd say the world is certainly much more varied compared to what was in Tsushima. Of course, that may be a bit of an unfair comparison, since the setting in Tsushima was restricted to being on an island, compared to the numerous different lands of Ezo you'll find yourself in Yotei, which, given its increased size, naturally leads to it being more varied and distinct than what can be found on just a singular island. The new gadgets and tools on offer pair nicely with the returning ones, and I also prefer how Yotei handles dealing with certain special enemy types compared to Tsushima. In that game, you had different stances you could use to better defend against and dispatch certain units, but in Yotei, Sucker Punch instead swapped this out for different equipable weapons, meaning you have a much wider selection of options available to you when deciding how best to take out your enemies. And just like with the katana, each one you obtain over the course of the adventure is supremely satisfying to wield, with excellent animation and sound work behind every single swing, stab, and thrust, all with their own differing strengths, weaknesses, and unique actions too. If I had any complaints, it'd really only be in regards to the narrative of Ghost of Yotei. While what's here isn't necessarily bad, I just find it to not be as interesting as the story found in the original game. Seeing Jin's gradual transformation into the Ghost of Tsushima over the course of that game's campaign felt more impactful than what we have in Yotei, which is a pretty run-of-the-mill revenge plot. It's not without its twists, turns, and memorable moments, and what's here is done well. I just think Tsushima holds a better, more interesting tale to be told. So in summary, Ghost of Yotei is a bigger, bolder adventure than its predecessor, delivering everything that it did so well back in 2020, while also amplifying and expanding it all to give us yet another open-world samurai epic. It's beautiful to behold, with sights, sounds, and music that are a treat to experience. Exploring all the various different lands of Ezo remains enjoyable throughout the entire journey, with so many great upgrades, armors, and awesome-looking cosmetic items and options scattered about, and it's really cool to put together your own personal look for the Onryo that your enemies in the game will come to know and fear. And of course, the combat in this game is so satisfying and fun to partake in, be it in the smallest of scuffles against wandering bandits or patrols, all the way up to the cinematic 1v1 duels against the most dangerous fellow studiers of the blade that Ezo has on offer. I loved Ghost of Yotei. It may not be the most revolutionary game to release this year, but what it does well, it does so well, and it's an easy contender for one of the best PS5 exclusives, and my second favorite game of the year. Finally, we arrive at my personal pick for 2025 Game of the Year, which goes to Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. Now this was a long time coming. After 18 years since the release of Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, and over 8 years since Metroid Prime 4 was officially revealed to be in production in 2017, before restarting development in 2019, we actually got Metroid Prime 4 here at the very end of 2025. And after finally playing this game, I can confidently say that it met my expectations of being pretty much exactly what I wanted. A brand new, mainline Metroid Prime game. Like the games from the original trilogy on GameCube and Wii, Prime 4 allows you to take a peek behind the visor of Samus Aran and partake in the usual exploration, combat, and upgrading of your own powers and capabilities you get in the mainline 2D Metroid games within fully 3D environments, all viewed from a first-person perspective. The original Metroid Prime trilogy of games are often lauded as some of the most immersive gaming experiences out there, with impressive, granular levels of detail packed into each and every frame of the action, level design, and characters, with equally impressive visuals and fantastic music backing up the whole experience. And all of this remains true for Metroid Prime 4. In fact, I'd say the developers at Retro Studios have outdone themselves once again, as they delivered one of the most technically impressive games available on both the original Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch 2. It's undeniably impressive what they've been able to achieve with this game, given the original Switch's aging hardware. What looks fantastic on Switch 1 cleans up to look even better on Switch 2, with Prime 4 offering up some of the most crisp and detailed visuals we've seen yet on Nintendo's new platform, very nicely with unwavering performance at either 60 or 120 FPS. Obviously, pretty graphics aren't enough to carry a game alone, and thankfully, Metroid Prime 4 also delivers an excellent gameplay experience to enjoy, alongside the stunning visuals, with the series' signature, immersive first-person exploration and combat back in all its glory, while also bringing some new shakeups and changes to the Prime formula, shakeups and changes that, seemingly, have been somewhat controversial. From what I've gathered, it seems some fans take issues with this game's linearity, feeling as if the explorable zones in the game are too straightforward, and thus not as interesting or fun as the prior areas we explored in Prime 1, 2, and 3. Others are also not too fond of this game's central hub world, Soul Valley, as they feel it takes away from the interconnectedness of prior Prime games, where each area led into one another, rather than having this large, mostly empty space here connecting the main levels instead. Additionally, the presence of other humans in the game, via a handful of Galactic Federation NPCs you'll encounter throughout the story, combined with a fair bit of spoken dialogue, makes some people feel like there's just too much in this game that makes it stray far away from what a Metroid Prime game is really supposed to be about. Personally though, I didn't find any of this to be so egregious to the point of hindering my enjoyment of the game, and none of these elements overstay their welcome, or get in the way of the core Metroid Prime experience, at least in my opinion. Soul Valley, the Galactic Federation companions, the psychic abilities, the Viola motorcycle, and all the other new elements within Prime 4 are just this game's version of Prime 2's Dark Ether, or Prime 3's heavy Galactic Federation presence, and planet hopping in the campaign. New experiments and ideas that are brought in and layered on top of the core, pure Metroid Prime formula Retro basically perfected with the original game. For some people, these new ideas will work, and for others, they might not, and that's perfectly fine. Like I said though, for me, none of these new elements in Prime 4 took away from my time with the game. The main areas of the game offer up that sweet first-person Metroid Prime gameplay that I've missed for so long, with beautiful, imposing alien locales to explore, full of different points of interest to scan for different information and lore, and of course, plenty of nasty alien creatures to blast through, who want nothing more than to deplete your energy tank reserves down to zero. Exploring Soul Valley offers up its own flavor of exploration, and while it is mostly empty, it's really not too big of an area, and there's enough scattered around in it to stay interesting, should you choose to search around for secrets and upgrades. It also serves as the main area where you'll use the Viola motorcycle. And I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty fun to speed around in, and seeing Samus on a motorcycle and performing an Akira drift is something I never knew I wanted until I had it. So thank you for that, Retro. The boss fights are all also excellent in this game, or perhaps even some of the best in the entire series. That could just be recency bias talking though, as it has been quite some time since I've revisited Prime 2 and 3, so my memory might not be doing the best job remembering all the boss encounters in those games. Still, Prime 4's bosses get no complaints from me, and are for sure another highlight of the game. As for the game's narrative, well, it has its moments, but for the most part, I feel as though it's rather undercooked, and there's evidence to suggest that what we ended up getting in the final game is only a fraction of what might have originally been planned or thought up, but for whatever reason got cut down and reworked into what we have today. I'm not too hung up on this aspect of the game, however, as the narrative of Metroid games isn't really the main reason I'm playing them, and isn't the main draw of the series anyways. And as I said, there's enough nice moments and interactions that did make it in to leave me satisfied with what we ended up getting. So in conclusion, I'll leave with this. From the second I booted the game up for the first time, to the moment the credits scroll began, I was thoroughly engrossed and entertained by Metroid Prime 4. In fact, this game hooked me so much that I ended up finishing it in just 3 play sessions. And yeah, it not being a super lengthy, open world game, RPG, or anything like that is a big reason I was able to do so, but I think that should help further enforce how much I enjoyed my experience. It just felt so nice to have another one of these games, as it really isn't anything quite like the Metroid Prime games being made en masse like some other game series or genres are today, and I hope that this isn't the last we see of the series. They may not release new games very often, but Retro Studios continues to impress and deliver truly amazing experiences you can't find anywhere else, and their presence in the modern-day gaming landscape is one I would very much like to continue and support, be it with more new games than the Metroid Prime series, or whatever else they may want to make in the future. Metroid Prime 4 Beyond was a stellar comeback for one of gaming's greatest series, and was my favorite game of 2025. Okay, well, that certainly was a lot of talking about my favorite video games that released in the current, but not for much longer year of 2025. Like with last year, the writing of this script and overall production of this video was quite the undertaking, but one that was satisfying to go through with, and fulfilling to see all come together. I think I've yapped on for long enough already though, so I'll keep this conclusion pretty brief and to the point. I want to give a big thank you to any and all of you who have watched my content over this past year. It really does mean a lot to me, and I hope that you'll continue with your support into the new year and beyond. But, with all that being said, I think that'll do it for this video. If you made it to the end, I thank you for watching. Your continued viewership and support is greatly appreciated. With the best of 2025 complete, that wraps up another year of video making for the channel, but I'll be back once January rolls around to inform you of the most interesting looking new releases that may be on my radar. I do hope you'll look forward to it. I wish you all a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and a Happy New Year. And last, but certainly not least, as always, I'll see you next time.